Hi, I'm Professor Michele Dauber, and I'm the chair of the committee to recall Judge Persky. Stick with us for a few minutes. We're just getting set up and started. I want to really thank the Brock Turner for Prison page to invite me to do this chat, and I'm excited to talk to all of you and take your questions about the recall campaign. If you want more information at any point while I'm talking, just click on the pinned comment, which you'll see either at the bottom or off to the side of the video at any time, and you can sign up to get updates. If you have a question during my introduction, then please just post it as a comment, and we have people who are assigned to capture your questions, and then I'll answer them. The other day was the 1-year anniversary of the sentence of Stanford student Brock Turner to only 6 months in jail and probation for the sexual assault of an unconscious woman, now known as Emily Doe, behind a dumpster at a fraternity party on Stanford campus. So it's really exciting to be able to tell you today that we're now in the last stages of filing our paperwork to serve official notice on Judge Aaron Persky that he is being recalled from the bench. That will make history for women. We'll be using the vote to send a message to our elected officials that rape is a serious crime and that voters will hold you accountable if you do not take it seriously. A vote against Judge Persky is a vote against rape culture, and it will send a message around the world that enough is enough. In the pinned comment, you'll see that we have some cool t-shirts that I want to tell you about as I get started, which I think pretty much sums up how we all feel about rape culture. You can click on the link and you can get one of our cool t-shirts for only $20, and that will help to support our campaign. Now I'm going to explain what we're doing and how you can be part of it. But before I get started, again, if you want to be involved in our campaign to recall Judge Persky, just click on the pinned link in the comment on the video, and that'll take you to a page where you can sign up to get our updates. And that's going to be more important now than before because things are going to start moving pretty quickly once we file our notice on Judge Persky. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the case, and I know that the followers of this page, probably more than most people, know the basic facts, but I'm just going to mention it. And then I'm going to talk about the recall campaign, how it works, what you can expect in the coming weeks, and how we can be successful in the June 2018 election to remove Judge Persky from the bench. And finally, at the end, I'll say a couple things about Emily Doe, how she's doing, and I'll share something she wrote a few months ago. Again, if at any time you want to sign up, just click the link, and then you can stay updated. If you have questions, just post them, and I'll answer them at the end of my introduction. Okay, so just the background on the case. As you know, Brock Turner attacked Emily Doe and was convicted by a jury for 3 serious felony sex crimes. Turner lied in court, and he never expressed remorse. Prosecutors asked for 6 years in prison, but rather than impose at least the minimum 2-year sentence, Judge Persky bent over backwards to grant Turner probation. And he did this essentially because Turner was young and he had previously been, prior to his crime, a very high-achieving person. Emily Doe did not receive justice. This sentence sent a dangerous message to potential perpetrators who are privileged college students and athletes. It said, don't worry, because in the unlikely event that you're caught and the police are called, the system will continue to have your back. To victims of sexual violence, particularly in the campus context, it sent the message, don't bother to call the police, because after all, if Emily Doe, who had all of this evidence and witnesses and a jury conviction, couldn't get justice, then what hope does any other survivor have? In her own words, Emily Doe recently wrote, quote, I was told that I was the best case scenario. I had forensic evidence, sober, unbiased witnesses, a slurred voicemail, police at the scene. I had everything, and still I was told it was not a slam dunk. I thought If this is what having it good looks like, what hells are other survivors living? If you're just joining us and want to get justice for Emily by recalling Judge Persky, click the link connected to the pinned comment on this video and sign up to get updates on how you can help our campaign. Well, this wasn't Judge Persky's first or only instance of overly lenient treatment for sex crimes and violence against women. On the contrary, journalists have reported on case after case after case, showing that Judge Persky has a long pattern of bias that is very disturbing, particularly where the perpetrators are college athletes or high status in some way. For example, one reported case involved a college football player who severely beat and choked his girlfriend and pushed her headfirst out of a car. He was convicted of felony domestic violence. Judge Persky didn't sentence him to jail or even to probation. He didn't want to hurt his chances to play Division I football, so he let him leave the state after he was convicted to go to the University of Hawaii. He didn't even put him on probation. He literally gave him nothing. The state of Hawaii was never informed that Judge Persky had sent a convicted domestic violence felon to live in their state. That young man was arrested again, not surprisingly, for domestic violence, this time in Washington, which was a third state where he also had no business being. Judge Persky also gave a break to another college football player who also attacked his girlfriend. He gave him weekend work crew and told him to attend a class for batterers. But Judge Persky didn't want this star running back to miss any games, so even though he was convicted of domestic violence, he let him skip weekend work crew on Saturday because that was game day, and you got to have your priorities after all. Then, incredibly, this football player didn't show up for his weekend work crew at all, and he also didn't show up to his batterers class. And Judge Persky just let him slide and let him slide and let him slide and never held him accountable. Football was more important. Nothing was done until the story was written about in the newspaper, and then prosecutors brought it before another judge who then did sentence that football player to jail. We need judges who take violence against women seriously. Rape and domestic violence are not shoplifting, and they're not a traffic ticket, and they shouldn't be sentenced like they are. These are very serious crimes, and they have lifelong consequences and impacts to the victims. They produce the same symptoms in many victims as torture. In fact, they are a form of torture. So we're all done having this treated like stealing a lipstick or graffiti. To get involved in our campaign to hold Judge Persky accountable, please click the link in the pinned comment, and that will take you to our campaign where you can sign up to get updates and be involved. So what's a recall, and what are we doing to make it happen? Judges in Santa Clara County and all over the state of California, where we're located, are elected. They're elected officials, just like city council members and school board members. The ultimate judges of their performance are the voters. And that is why, in the end, this has to go before the voters. So how does that work? A recall is a right that's given to the people under the California Constitution, and it's governed by many, many complicated rules. It's a difficult and long process. Fortunately, we're persistent. It starts with filing formal paperwork, and that's where we are today. The very first step is filing something called a notice of intention, and that's what we're preparing to serve personally on Judge Persky. We get 200 words to say why we're recalling him, and then when it's filed, he gets 7 days to respond, and he gets 200 words to say why the voters should retain him. Our 200 words and his 200 words together will be printed on a paper petition. So I know a lot of you have signed change.org petitions or other online petitions. This is a old school petition. It's on paper, and it has to be signed in person by registered voters in our county. our volunteers and signature gatherers will hit the streets with that petition, and they will have to collect 90,000 signatures, which is a big number. Live in person, 90,000 voters in Santa Clara County on all approved forms. And then we have to put all those signatures together and verify each one by hand to make sure that the addresses match the addresses on the voter rolls. And then we have to submit them, and the county registrar of voters will have to count them. And if we get enough, then they'll certify the recall for the June 2018 ballot. And at that point, they'll open the race up for other candidates to run as well. And then when election day comes in June of 2018, there will be a question at the top of the ballot. And that question will be, should Judge Aaron Persky be recalled from the Superior Court? And if we get 50% of the voters plus one vote, 50% plus one, then he is no longer a judge. And whoever among the candidates who came forward, who are listed at the bottom part of the ballot, gets the most votes will be the new judge. And that change actually happens immediately. We don't have to wait for Inauguration Day or anything like that. As soon as the votes are tallied, he is terminated and the new judge takes his seat. So that is sort of immediate gratification for the campaign. I have some very exciting news to share, which I haven't really talked about in a big forum like this before, which is that a woman candidate has indicated that she will be running for Judge Persky's seat in this election when we get on the ballot. Her name is Cindy Hendrickson, and she's a longtime experienced prosecutor of domestic violence and one of the highest ranking women prosecutors in our county. I was at an event actually last night for a domestic violence service provider. They were discussing services for torture survivors, and many of whom are sexual assault survivors and domestic violence victims. And they knew her. So when I mentioned her name, they all were like, oh, Cindy, she's really victim-centered. And that's what we need. We need someone to run who is really victim-centered, because clearly Judge Persky is the opposite of really victim-centered. He is really rapist-centered. I'm sure other candidates will run, but she's a highly qualified woman who is pro-criminal justice reform. You know, she's not for mass incarceration, but she's also very fair, and she is survivor-centered. So we're really excited about that news. Our goal is to remove Judge Persky, but another goal is to turn violence against women into a voting issue. Voting Judge Persky out is going to send a message to elected officials everywhere, judges, prosecutors, sheriffs, and others, that no means no, and we mean business. This is a long road ahead of us, and in order to run a successful campaign, we're going to need the help of absolutely everyone. You can help by signing up. So if you go to the link that is in the pinned comment on this page to sign up, you can receive action alerts and updates. When there are media stories about the campaign, you'll get an alert so you can share it across social media. If Judge Persky says something in his response that we don't like, we'll let you know about it so that you can help us to respond. So please sign up. And if you live in this area, in the Bay Area, and you can volunteer an afternoon to help us get signatures, then we need you. We really need your help. If you're able to donate, please help us. We're a grassroots, woman-powered campaign and, person-powered campaign of all kinds. Everyone is a volunteer. We do plan to get some paid help with the signatures, because 90,000 is a big number, frankly. But the more you do, the less paid help we'll need. And don't forget that you can get one of these awesome t-shirts that express very clearly what we think about rape culture for only $20. And the link is at the side of the post in that pinned tweet to get your t-shirt. So I'm going to just say a couple words about Emily and how she's doing. As you probably know, Emily Doe is a friend of our family. I've known her a long time. She's an incredibly strong young woman, and she has an amazing talent. She's always been really talented since she was little, actually, which it didn't surprise me that she was able to encapsulate the experience of being a victim of sexual assault better than I had ever seen anyone do it. So we're really lucky. Actually, the whole world is lucky that she agreed to have her statement published. Right now, she's working on her healing journey, and I can see her enjoying life, which is good to see. And she hasn't let this injustice hold her down or hold her back. In fact, I think it's made her stronger and more determined to stand up for other survivors. She's been taking good care of herself and is, of course, relieved to have the trial behind her, although, of course, very disappointed in the outcome, as she wrote. Last November, I don't know if you had the chance to see this, but Emily Doe was awarded the Glamour Magazine Woman of the Year Award. But because she's anonymous and no one knows her identity, I had the great privilege of being able to go to the ceremony and accept the award for her. And in preparation for that, she published a new essay with Glamour, and she also wrote a little acceptance speech. And you may have read the essay in Glamour, but probably didn't hear the acceptance speech because, it was more obscure. So I thought I would read you a little piece of it. So this is the beginning of it. Quote, "The past year has been hard, but through the worst of times, I've discovered I'm indestructible. I was slow to learn, but now I can't forget it. I am one of the many who have fought before me, so many who have had enough. I stand among millions of groundbreaking Emily Does. I have seen them speaking. I have seen the strength that accompanies healing. With every setback, the world should know that every survivor has a story. Every story is our power. Together we are louder than any system or person who threatens to silence us. Together we are countless and unstoppable, and now we are indignantly rising. Be excited, keep going, and I'll be fighting alongside you." And I just feel like, how can we lose when we have champions and advocates like that in our corner? With that, I'd like to answer any questions you have about the campaign. So I look forward to talking with you virtually. One second. Okay, so I see one. Currently, Nadia says, currently only 2% of rapists spend a day in jail. What legal reforms, in your opinion, are most needed to get more justice for survivors? This is a great question. Actually, it starts with reporting. So rape is one of the most underreported crimes. Around a third of sexual assaults are reported to the authorities, and actually in the campus context, it's even less. It's only 20% of rapes that occur in the college context are even reported to the police. And that 30% number includes, of course, child sexual assault, which has a higher, to some extent, could be reported more because there are many people who are mandated reporters. But in any event, it's only about a third of sexual assaults that are reported. And then of those, only about half result in any arrest or charges being brought. And then only a percentage, I think about 2/3 of those or half, result in a conviction. And then by the time you get down to anyone spending a day in jail, it's the number that you gave. So I think the first thing we need to do is deal with reporting. One of the reasons that the recall of Judge Persky is so important is that I feel like it diminishes reporting. Like I said earlier, the message that this sentence sent to victims was really dangerous because it discourages women or other victims of survivors of sexual assault from reporting when they don't believe they're going to be listened to or taken seriously, or even if they're lucky enough to get all the way to the end of the process with a verdict, it could be undermined by a biased judge. So we really want to ensure that these cases are taken seriously. They've done surveys and asked survivors why they didn't report, and fear of not being believed, fear of not seeing any consequences, fear of having to go through an invasive process and at the end see no result, fear of being blamed for the attack itself. These are all reasons that victims gave. So we have to end rape culture. We have to change the way we think about this crime, and we have to start holding both perpetrators and accountable, and the institutions and individuals who enable perpetrators. So we need, let's see, another question. This is from Elena. Are there upcoming fundraising events, and how can we help? That's a great question, Elena. Thank you. We are actively raising money. This campaign is very expensive. We've raised nearly $450,000 for the campaign at this point. We have another amount, unfortunately, more than that to go, about another $600,000 to go. This is going to cost about $1 million, a little more than that, to run this campaign. Santa Clara County is a big county with more than 1 million registered voters, and you know, it is very expensive to communicate with all those voters. We have many language groups. This is an expensive campaign. In order to be effective, we need to be able to communicate with voters after we collect those signatures and qualify. So every dollar that's being given to the campaign, whether it's through your t-shirt or just in a donation, will help us. Right now, the money is going to collect those signatures. Each signature costs about $4 to collect and verify. Once we have qualified for the ballot, then we have to do mail, direct mail, television, radio, other forms of voter communication. Everyone working for this campaign is a volunteer. There are no paid consultants. There are no paid anybody. Everyone is a volunteer. So every dollar is going towards those signatures and that voter communication. One of the most successful kinds of fundraising we've done is on the internet, online. You can go to our website, which is, you know, there's a link in that pinned comment, and you can share that link with all your friends and across your social media and ask people, you know, give $10, give $5, give $20, give whatever you can afford, because absolutely every dollar is helping us. The other thing you can do is buy one of our awesome Fuck Rape Culture t-shirts, because that money helps us, and it also, you know, will get people interested in our campaign. Another thing that you can do is have a coffee, hold a coffee in your home. And if you have friends, if you're in, you know, the proximity of Northern California or close by, I'll come to your home and talk about the campaign and ask for donations for it. And that's been a very successful way that we've raised money here in the Bay Area. So you can also have an event, if you live far away, without me, where you show this video, because this video is basically one of, you know, some of the kinds of things that I say when I come to your house and give an event. So if you're far away, I see some viewers in Missouri, show this video, invite 10 girlfriends over for coffee in the morning, have coffee and bagels, watch the video, call me on the phone maybe, or do a Skype chat, ask me your questions, and then make donations to the campaign. So we would be we've done all kinds of events, by the way. There is an organization which actually is called Fuck Rape Culture, which has had a series of concerts, comedy benefits, you know, just whatever you can imagine doing, we've done to get people engaged and involved and raise money. So thanks for that question. Here is a question from Samantha. So if the key is reporting, what do survivors do who did report to the police and they mishandled the case, didn't collect lost evidence, didn't test rape kits, etc.? When you're brave enough to come forward and your case is mishandled, it's highly discouraging. I could not agree more. In fact, that is a very, very common problem for survivors. Obviously, failing to test rape kits is a big deal, throwing away evidence, mishandling evidence. And the Justice Department investigation into Baltimore, you know, really showed that those kinds of things also affect communities of color. In fact, this kind of failure by the law enforcement and by judges and by the system obviously have a disproportionate impact on communities that lack access to justice in many other ways. And so these are, you know, very serious problems. I think that one of the ways that our campaign in general will help this. I mean, it is about Judge Persky, but it is about a lot more than Judge Persky, because it is sending the message that we're not standing for this anymore. Enough is enough. And we expect the system to take these crimes seriously. And I do think that there are other organizations and movements that are addressing this too, in the nonprofit context. But to be perfectly honest, until public officials are held accountable at the polls, they have, not as much incentive to care or get active on this issue. We need to show them that we mean it. And the way that you show someone that you mean it, an elected official in a democracy, is you vote them out. So, I feel that our campaign will make a contribution to that problem, that very serious problem that you're highlighting as well. The next, wow, so many questions here. Okay. From Nadia, why are we so reluctant to hold perpetrators accountable? That is a really good question. I think that it really has to do with longstanding belief that we can't trust survivors and we can't believe survivors. So it's really discouraging when you see a situation like Emily Doe's, where the jury did trust her and did believe her, and still the judge was able to derail the jury verdict and take away any measure of justice. I think that there's a belief that women lie. The persistent belief, rape myths, women lie. The perpetrator's life will be damaged. The perpetrator's life will be derailed. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe it was a miscommunication. I mean, there's a deep, misogyny and victim blaming, even when the victim is not, a female, child victims, male victims, trans victims. There's a deep belief that, this couldn't have happened, this didn't happen. One of the things that I think is helping to move the needle on this, in addition to our movement to hold elected officials accountable, which I think really is helping already and will continue to help, is videotape. That is available in cell phones. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but if you think about, say, the Steubenville case and other cases where we have seen, things that maybe previously no one would have believed, but now there it is on video. And I think in that way, it's somewhat similar to the change in attitudes around police violence. Not that I'm comparing them, of course it's quite different, but in some ways, the fact that people, you have a powerful perpetrator in both cases against a powerless or less powerful victim, and people didn't believe that this kind of abuse was occurring. And then, like in the Vanderbilt case, with the gang rape of that horrible incident in Vanderbilt, that kind of evidence, just like in police violence cases, is incredibly powerful. It doesn't mean that you have to have that evidence or no one will believe you. What I think it does is it spreads the belief. It's like, wow, if it was true in that case, then it might be true in this other case where there is no video. It punctures the bubble of, oh, this is a lie, it couldn't have happened, because we can see it happening. And so I think that we are on the road to changing attitudes about that. But again, until people are held accountable, elected officials are held accountable, I don't think we're going to see the kind of change we want to see. And I think Judge Persky is a great place to start, where we can be effective in doing that. See, we have some more questions here. From Susan, do you think this recall campaign could actually have an effect on this problem nationally? If so, how? Yes, I do. I absolutely do. And I've already said a couple ways that I think it will have an effect, but let me just say that one thing I give all of the credit for the tremendous amplification of this case to Emily Doe. It all goes to her writing, her amazing voice, the power of her words. But the fact is that this case had enormous social media amplification, millions and millions and millions of people all over the world know about this case. So when we recall Judge Persky, it is not going to be happening in some obscure corner of the universe that nobody ever heard of, and whatever, it was a tree falling in the forest and no one was there to hear it. This is going to be just like the case itself became very amplified and moved across a ton of platforms, both traditional media and social media. The recall will too. And so that is why I think it's going to send such a powerful message to elected officials everywhere that, hey, your constituents care about this and they will vote you out of office on this issue. It's from Barbara. I'm a journalism educator. What do you think is the role of campus media? Oh, this is a great question, Barbara. What do you think is the role of campus media to report about campus sexual assault? My research shows they're good at telling individual stories, but what are some of the other stories they should be reporting? What a fantastic question, and thank you for that. One of the things that I've worked on at Stanford is the issue of data transparency, because you cannot manage what you don't measure. And while I think that individual victim stories and survivor narratives are incredibly powerful and are very important, they're always vulnerable to the counter argument that, well, that's just one case. And also, here, let me tell you my sad story of this falsely accused neighbor son. And, now we have dueling narratives. And so I think there is no, partly because I'm also a sociology professor, so I have a real love of data. I believe there's no substitute for hard facts transparently put forward. So one of the things that I support is Senator Kirsten Gillibrand's Campus Save bill, or is that what it's called? Yeah, Act, which would, that might not be the name of it, I'll post it later, but I support Senator Gillibrand's bill because it actually includes within it requirements for data and transparency. So every school should be doing a climate survey. Student journalists, if your school, your college hasn't done a climate survey, then you should be writing about the fact that they haven't done a climate survey and writing editorials pressuring them to do a climate survey and to make the data transparently and publicly available. Get that information out there. That's an anonymous survey that asks students about a variety of non-consensual sexual experiences that they have had. And here at Stanford, they did a survey and they tried to obscure the data and spin the numbers, but due to a lot of faculty and graduate students working together to reanalyze the data, we were able to show conclusively that the survey showed that 43% of undergraduate women at Stanford experience sexual assault or some form of very serious sexual misconduct, sexual violence during their 4 years here at Stanford. That kind of number is incredibly powerful, and getting that number out there, getting it in headlines, getting people to understand how bad the problem is really matters. The other thing that student journalists should be digging for, and this is a lot easier if you're at a public school than a private school, because most public schools are subject to some form of freedom of information state disclosure. Another thing that's really good is to get discipline information. How many complaints? How many investigations? How are they being handled? And how many students are actually being found responsible? What's the rate at which students are found responsible? How many are having their penalties changed on appeal? That's a really important question, because if any of you read John Krakauer's book Missoula, what you saw was that the school actually found the quarterback, who's sort of at the center of that story, or one of those stories, responsible, and expelled him, and then that punishment was reversed on appeal. Appeals can be a way that victims are denied justice in the college context. So these are all stories that need to be told in data, in numbers, and those numbers need to be put out there in tables transparently and compared to other schools. How is Stanford doing compared to Cal? How is Stanford doing compared to Harvard? How are we doing compared to Yale? Even how are we doing in terms of how transparent we are compared to these other schools? Are we hiding the information compared to other schools? And I think that those kinds of stories are very powerful. What's happening with consequences? Who's being expelled? Which schools are expelling and which aren't? Those are also good stories. So I appreciate that question very much. From John, should there be civilian oversight of judges like there is of police? Well, John, there is, and it's by the voters, at least in states where judges are elected. But in every state, there absolutely should be, and there should be a serious way of dealing with questions of bias. You know, if you have a judge who is biased in any way, based on race, based on sexual orientation, based on sex, based on sexual violence, based, on national origin, biased against immigrants, biased in favor of police. If you have who commit violence against, civilians, if you have judges who are biased, bias destroys faith in the justice system. There have been many, many empirical studies done that show that when people feel that they don't have access to an unbiased, fair decision maker, they just lose faith in the whole system. And that is how you get, by the way, low levels of reporting. One reason that we have such low levels of reporting of sexual assault and sexual violence is that people do not believe that they are going to be treated fairly. They believe the system is biased against them. And, as Judge Persky shows, often, sadly, they are right. And so what we need to do is have absolutely good oversight of judicial officers, exactly as you're suggesting, some form of effective, citizen commissions, and not just in the hands of judges and attorneys to review cases for many things, but also bias. Right now, it's hard to review judges for anything that isn't essentially a crime. Bribery, having sex with a, person before you and not disclosing it by the judge, some form of severe conflict of interest, or, criminal behavior. And it shouldn't have to be just criminal behavior. It should also be bias, because a biased judge is not an independent judge, and there is no judicial independence where the judge is biased. Okay, so let's see. What else do we have? Sorry about this. Let's see. We have another question from Nadia. What kind of education should we be teaching students for prevention, and when should that education start? Okay, so that is a great question. We need, comprehensive, age-appropriate sex ed and consent education from pre-K to 12 and beyond in the college context. It is never too early. It is never too late. And it is shocking to me how little sex education and consent education we really offer in our schools, and how poor quality it really is, and how late students learn about consent and assault. I think to some extent this is parents wanting to protect their kids from information about sexual assault, which they think learning about is going to be traumatic to them. You don't have to have a graphic explanation of sexual assault for a 5-year-old, but they're not too young to teach them that you don't touch other people when they don't agree to be touched. Keeping your hands to yourself and asking, can I hug you? Can I touch you? These are appropriate things that we should be teaching kids at a really early age. As we move into the teen years, it's really important to teach prevention education, effective and evidence-based. Evidence-based. One thing that I have been shocked about here at Stanford and in the college context generally is that here we are, one of the greatest research institutions on the face of the earth, and we're not using evidence-based, research-supported, by and large, prevention education in the college context. There are some really promising things, like I just read a study about something called Green Dot, which is a bystander prevention education-based program that is showing promising research-based results. And there are other prevention-based empowerment education models that are coming. I've seen some studies in the New England Journal of Medicine and other places. So whatever it is, we need to look at and I think we need to look at perpetrator-based education, potential perpetrator. We need to focus on everyone. Everyone can benefit from evidence-based, research-based education, and we need to make sure that we aren't solely focusing on potential victims, but we're also focusing on potential perpetrators. I think the number one thing that I would do for prevention is when you have an identified student who has committed a sexual offense and they have been gone through a fair process and they have had all their rights and the investigation has been thorough, equitable, and fair as required by law, and you have found them responsible for sexual assault, they should be expelled. There is absolutely no reason to keep them in your educational institution. That is how you prevent them from doing it again in your educational institution. Now, you may also want them to receive some form of, treatment. You may also want them to receive some form of help to not offend again, and they may also need to become involved in the criminal justice system in order to ensure that that happens. But certainly for educational institutions who are interested in prevention, accountability will go a long way. It will also send a clear, consistent message to your other students who aren't being expelled that there are things that you can do where you can no longer be part of this community. If you commit a sexual assault, it's inconsistent with being part of this community, the school community. And I think that when you send that clear, consistent message, that works together with your prevention education to make sure that you have lower rates of assault on campus. And of course, the only way to know if your prevention education is working is to conduct those anonymous climate surveys and have that data so that you can track, the trajectory, which is hopefully declining, so that your reports are going up and your incidents are going down. You know that you've succeeded when your reports are high and your prevalence is low. That means students trust you to report and the prevalence is declining on campus or in society generally. Okay, last question. How can parents talk to their kids about consent, healthy relationships, and sexual assault? This is a great question. I have always had, obviously, very clear, direct communication with my kids about, I have 5 children, about sex, relationships, and assault, and the things that are dangerous and the situations that, and the people you can trust and the people you can't trust, and, being a upstander and things like that. I think that one thing that you could do with your kids is to read the book So I don't know if we lost all of you, but I'm back. I apologize for that. Just to finish that thought, hi, I'm back, sorry. Just to finish that thought, I think that you could choose to read the book, have a family discussion about it, such as the book Missoula or the book We Believe You, or watch The Hunting Ground. There's a terrific documentary film called The Hunting Ground, which is about campus sexual assault, and you could choose to watch that with your teens and then have a discussion. I think that's an excellent film. There's also the film Audrey and Daisy, which I would only really recommend for older teens because it has themes of suicide. Also, if you have a teen who has a history of depression, that could be very triggering. So, you have to know your kid, but that kind of discussion can be, those could be conversation starters. But that, I'm not an expert in that, just a mom. So I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity today. Sorry for the slight technical difficulty. Again, please join our campaign. Please sign up and click that link and join us because we need your support. Thank you so much.